Hi, this is Mark Stowers, the host of the radio show called I Made It. And today I have with me Jack Maher, who is a digital transformationalist. Is that what it is, Jack?
Yes, digital transformation. Lately it's been digital transformation evangelist.
Okay. Why don't you give me a rundown of what a digital evangelist is?
Sure. So essentially there's a lot going on in the technology world right now, and that's not a big change, but it has much more impact than the changes have had recently versus the past, particularly to business owners, and that's around digital transformation. And so one of the things that I'm doing is spending a lot of time talking with business owners and business leaders to help them understand how they can sort of take charge again of their IT and make it work for them as a competitive advantage versus, some of the cost center approach that we've had with IT in the past. So that's where the evangelism comes in, is working with IT folks to implement these things, but even more importantly, talking to business leaders and managers about what they can and should expect and get from their IT investments.
Now, I assume that this is big company stuff, right?
My work so far has predominantly been with big companies, Fortune 100 companies, but it
Okay.
actually applies to all businesses. And, in fact, I think it's really the smaller businesses that have not been aware of the opportunities and may think, that this is something that's only for the big guys. And while the big companies are saving millions of dollars using this, they'll see very good savings, and what's more important, more flexibility and value in the relationships they have with their customers by adopting the digital approach of today.
Okay. Well, how did you end up here?
So I've been in IT for the past 20 years after being in business before that. I moved into IT from the business side to help bring the business view to IT back when, IT was very introspective. And the last 5 years I spent at Nationwide Insurance helping them with their digital transformation. In fact, my co-author and I were responsible for designing. He had the tools side, and I had the people and process side. And
were you a project manager in that, or what?
I spent most of my IT career as a project manager. I've also been a developer and an architect. I've run data centers. In this case, I wasn't a project manager. I was actually a process manager. I was responsible for the way that IT teams operate within Nationwide, because when you have an IT group as large as that, they had over 8,000 people in IT. A little bit of inefficiency creates a whole lot of extra cost. And so by focusing on processes, we were able to significantly accelerate and reduce the cost of their technology solutions.
Yeah. I looked through some of these questions that you had suggested we ask, and, it struck me that I was exposed to ISO 9000.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the discussions that you have, the lean and agile value stream, were all fitting in the discussions I was having in the 1990s in terms of, managing stuff.
Yeah. In fact, that was part of the inspiration for the processes that we built. I looked back at, what had worked well in the past. And ISO 9000 was definitely one of those things, because what that's really about is you tell yourself or the auditors who are conducting the assessment of an ISO 9000 certification, these are the things that we do, and they have to address all of the important parts of your business. And this is how we execute on these things. And then at some point in the future, you reevaluate. This is what you said you do. Are you actually doing that? And that difference is where the issues come in. That's really what we did here. We went through the organization, and one of the key things for us was to make sure that the people who do the work, who are always the ones who know the work the best, had the primary voice in how we documented and how we brought different practices together. So, with the 8,000 plus folks in IT, there were folks doing things very differently in different parts of the organization. A big part of what we wanted to do was to get the voice of those practitioners into the practices so that we could catch that up with what were best practices in the organization and tie that to using the right tools, consolidate on the best practices, so we would go to one group and find they had done something really well, and we would then pull that in. In fact, my first working title for this book was called Jeet Kune Lean, which was a play on the Bruce Lee book, Tao of Jeet Kune Do, because what Bruce Lee really did was he took all of these different martial arts and non-martial arts like boxing and fencing, kung fu, karate, brought the best pieces of each of those and brought it into one consistent process. And part of his teaching was that as soon as you learn something better, don't do the old thing anymore. Drop it like a bad habit and move on to using the new, better process. And that's how we built our processes nationwide to do that. So you'll see evidence of lean going back, to the original Deming work, of Agile, of DevOps, of all of the good things that have happened in IT. And that was the hard part for me. So while my co-author, Carmen, was actually, delivering tools to teams and teaching them how to use it, I was 2 steps behind him documenting, okay, now that you have a contemporary tool versus some of the old stuff we had, and you've modified your processes to take advantage of the tools and better ways of working, I was capturing all that into a consistent and cohesive way so that folks could, from anywhere in the organization, go look and see what's the standard process. If we're doing something different, is it because we should, or did we get lazy? So, or did we forget, or maybe we didn't know. Maybe there's something that's new that popped up in another group. And so making it a very social way to deliver the process guidance was an important part of this as well. And that's part of what I share in the evangelization.
Yeah. Like I said, I recognize this. I was a production and inventory manager for a while in one of my careers, and I was also a ERP systems implementator for a while. So yeah, I had a lot of exposure. I was reading up a lot on some of these books, so it just seems familiar when I started looking through it. And I'm sure you were doing pretty much the same thing I was doing when I was implementing these systems company-wide.
Right. Yeah, I've done Oracle ERP implementations, and you name it. In the IT world, I've done it, and I enjoy that. And I really enjoy getting back to the business side these days. Yeah,
and mine was all small stuff. IBM System 38s.
Sure. I remember that, and we replaced that with an AS400. And
yeah. I did all of that. And then a lot of there were a lot of desktops too, I think, in the last 5 or 6 years of my career there.
Right.
So you wrote a book, Standing on Shoulders. Can you explain who was that written for? Was that written for the users in the company, or what was it written for?
It's really written for senior leaders, particularly CEOs, presidents, folks that sit on the board, because those folks, and I have a lot of friends, having been in the business for a while, I've seen a number of colleagues who have risen through the ranks. And so being able to have a pretty frank conversation with senior leaders is a real benefit for me. And I continually hear the same frustration that the technology teams and other parts of the business are always coming with their hand out for money to do, something new and different, some kind of transformation. We need to do a lean transformation. We want to, move from what we've been doing into agile practices. And, automated testing was the flavor of the day a few years ago. And those folks are really frustrated. They know that something has to happen to get from where they are to this new digital reality. they feel like they've been putting money out hand over fist, and they're never seeing the kinds of results that they're expecting. And so,
I was
really. I'm sorry.
I was involved in some of that stuff too. I was the CFO of a company and in charge of the IT operations, going to the board of directors and to the CEO and saying, hey, we need more money for this or that. I mean, it got to be frustrating because budgets get blown pretty quickly.
Right. And there's no such thing as enough money to go around. So not getting the return on investment is a big problem. And it really comes down to, not understanding, because the way things were sold. I frequently call out software vendors and consulting firms, and my favorite whipping post is around automated testing. I had lunch with a friend of mine not long ago, and he's now the president of a consulting firm. And the subject of automated testing came up, and he said, "Oh, Jack, I am so frustrated. We're not getting anything near the return on investment we were promised." And I said, "Hold on a second. Don't go any further. Let me guess. You thought you were going to be able to lay off half your testers after you brought in these automated testing tools, right?" He said, "Yeah. We haven't been able to get rid of anybody." I said, "That's because an expedient method was used to get money out of you, because reducing the number of testers has never been part of that agenda. It's about doing more testing and doing more consistent testing and doing it better and doing it faster. But fewer testers, that's never been really the end results or the expectation of that." Similarly, with Lean and with Agile, they were typically done in bubbles. So, you get a bunch of developers around, they're really super excited to do the Agile work. But when you start to talk to, managers and accounting, they can't see the kind of timelines and expectations for delivery that they used to with sort of the waterfall method, even though they were always disappointed with that. So this book really is to help connect those dots, to, focus on this is what we need to do, and then this is why we need to do that, and then at a high level, this is how we're going to do that. So they could realistically then go back to the board and say, look, I know you've heard this before. We need to completely reorganize. We need this kind of money. We need this kind of runway. And it's really geared towards helping them have that frank and fact-based discussion and have the ability then to have some realistic expectations about the outcome. Because when you don't tie these things together, it's like, something happens in your life, maybe a high-stress period, and you lose a bunch of weight. But you don't change the way you eat. You don't change, the way you live from an exercise perspective. Well, that weight is going to come back. And it's just like that with this. The real important pieces of a digital transformation aren't the technology tools. They're an essential piece, but they're nowhere near the most important piece. The most important piece is people and focusing on people. So what this book really enables you to do is to put together this big approach that's made up of a lot of small pieces, and each of them, when you take it apart and you look at it, it's about doing the right thing for the right reasons. So we want to totally focus on our employees so that they feel safe and loved and needed, because as we move forward with some of the technology pieces, we're going to find that we don't need as many folks in some of the roles that we have today. You mentioned project managers earlier. That's one of the categories. Business analysts is another category. Both of those are going to see a lot less need in the future, but we need those people. We want those people. They understand our business. They understand our company, especially if they're middle management. We're going to see a huge change in the number of folks that are in middle management seats. And what we really need is we need their experience, their expertise, their knowledge about what's upstream from them just a little bit and downstream. We need those folks to move into that testing space. So when I said before that the automated testing has never been about cutting people, it's really about enabling folks to sit at a higher level and review test results, not execute manual tests, but to look at the test results and say, hey, does this make sense? And that's one of the big things that's been missing. For years, we've had all these test scripts, but nobody really knew except whoever wrote the test script how it really worked or what the results were supposed to be. So that's really what we want to do, is have this environment where folks, that don't see their path forward in their current role, because that's going to change, they do see the relationship with the company and trust the company because the company's earned that trust to help them move into a new role. And so it really becomes this, what we like to call a virtuous cycle of positivity. As folks, when we relieve them from a lot of the administrative things and enable them to focus on decisions and complex analysis and, evaluation of results, those kinds of things that no automation can do, we enable them to do that and reduce the overall burden upon them. So they can, if you're always fighting the clock, if you're fighting production, you can't be innovative. You can't be creative. So we give folks, a little bit of headspace so that, A, they're feeling good about what they're doing. They can do what they do best. We minimize the amount of administrative and other things. And most importantly, give them the room and flexibility and time and tools to be creative and innovative. That's really what's going to drive our organizations forward. And when we do that with them, they and the organization can be obsessed with our customers altogether, and then everybody wins.
So, Jack, how do you see this fitting into a smaller, a smaller business? Let's say a $50 to $100 million business. Okay.
Right. Yeah. That is actually the real sweet spot. And here's why. We have folks right now, and you may recall from your days of doing the ERP implementations, we have a lot of software, we have a lot of technology in our organizations that don't have anything to do with what makes us different and better than somebody else in the marketplace. For example, HR systems. Very few organizations would be able to realistically say, my HR system is my competitive advantage. Now, if it is, then maybe you should continue doing what you're doing. But if it's not, like for most folks, it doesn't make sense to, buy the software package, pay folks to come in and install it, every year or two or whatever, have the upgrades done, do all of that maintenance of the data. It's crazy for most folks, especially when we think about the fact that those capabilities are readily available through a cloud service. So, for example, the company that I was with last year, before I wrote the book, they were using PeopleSoft, and a very large company. They moved to a solution called Workday, and it's a cloud-based solution. So they had 8 to 10 folks that were doing the maintenance and development work in the HR system that they were able to move, and in fact they did move them into testing so that we could make sure that everything that was done in the cloud suited us, and we're able to stay on top of it because in the cloud everything is always kept up to date. So when there's a new release, new features, it is automatically added for everyone that's using that solution. So they were able to be proactive and save a lot of money.
Well, now a question I have for you is that, in my experience too, CRMs were a big issue as well for most of these people, especially technology-wise. Is that still true?
I say CRM was one of the areas that was first to have a cloud-based service, and we think about Salesforce.com as being the 800-pound gorilla in that space. They were one of the early adopters to move to the cloud, and so I'm not sure, honestly, if they still offer an on-premises solution, but using their off-premise and being able to integrate that with other services has gotten better and better. One of the big approaches for the past few years from the IT solution vendors has been very much a focus on APIs, or an automated programmatic interface. So you can send information to what we would have used to call a program with the information and parameters, and then it will just return the results. And so you're able to have processing done. You're able to extract information from another system or even put information into another system through these APIs that enable you then to, in the past we would try to get all of our software from one vendor so it could work with each other, it could talk to each other.
Right.
That's no longer necessary because of these APIs. So the ability to use best of breed in each piece of your business is now very viable.
Yeah, my experience was that I was in a couple of companies where we were actually the developer and choosers of the software that we were going to pick out. And, we always looked at it as, the bosses wanted to get 80 to 90% of what we needed to fit into the company. We always looked at if we got 60% of what we needed, that was a good fit.
Right, and then you'd have to build your own or figure some kind of workarounds and all kinds of fun things like that don't typically go well in the long run.
Yeah, and those were, again, granted, that was 20 years ago, but, those were the experiences I had I think about, 10 or 15 years was that kind of activity.
The other side of that, there's really two pieces of that are important for us to think about. Number one is, arguably our most important customers are our employees first. So the systems that we use need to suit the employees. In fact, a lot of the DevOps work that's been a big focus for me recently, doing a lot of DevOps coaching, training, and education. A lot of that came about because the folks that were in IT were very unhappy with, they could almost never have a major holiday of their own. I know I personally spent a ton of Christmases and New Year's in the data center, right? I know you did too with the System 3638.
Oh, God.
When it came time to put new software out, release new capabilities, well, you can only do that on the third Wednesday between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., that kind of thing. And they said, this is crazy. I want to be home for my kid's softball game. I want to go to the parent-teacher conferences, all of the things that they wanted to do in the evenings they couldn't do because they had to work these off hours. So DevOps came about so that they could make these changes quickly and easily in an ongoing way. And that really bleeds a lot into why this digital transformation becomes so important for so many companies, because really all companies today and moving forward really are technology companies that happen to play in one market or another. So even if you're a carpenter in the Ukraine, you can still be very competitive in a market somewhere else. You can build and ship and have that viability, and the customers, that are buying our products and services, their expectations have changed. With a post-Google and post-Amazon world, we're very used to being able to go online, find exactly what I want, have it shipped to me. Here in Columbus, Ohio, I can have something within a couple of hours, same day for sure, almost all the time, and almost anything from anywhere in the world in like 2 days. And those kinds of expectations are now bleeding into the commercial space as well. So having the right kinds of tools for our employees and for our customers is incredibly important. And that's what a lot of this does. It also enables us to do a whole lot more, better, faster, cheaper, and safer than we used to by using some of these tools. And what that does.
Now, Jack, let me ask a couple of questions that I ran into in my sordid experience. What about, does the book help you deal with the employees that say, well, this is the way we do it, don't need to change that?
This book isn't geared towards the employees as much. I will say, though, and you asked me this question, and I kind of got sidetracked and didn't answer it. It was originally written for senior leaders. One of the things that folks have come back to me and said, you know what, I bought this book and I was going to give it to my boss, but I need to get another one because I've all dog-eared this one up because there's stuff in here and I really want them to get. And so what it kind of becomes for some folks is a way of managing up that says, hey, there's some stuff in here that I think you might want to think about for our company. It also helps folks that are, going through this digital transformation, and in particular, I'm thinking about middle management here, that says, hey, I've seen the song and dance before, and I don't believe you. We've been around for more than 2 years, and we haven't always been, a happy family kind of thing. So why should I buy into this now? By being able to see that, it's not just pure altruism. Although altruism is a wonderful thing, the reality is we have to answer the question of what's in it for me, for each and every person that we want to do something differently. And we have to have a reasonable answer for that.
Yeah. I found that as a project manager, like you said, I not only had to manage down to the employee level, I also, like you said, I had to manage up too.
Right.
To my boss and then to my boss's boss.
There's another book that I hope to have out by the fall. It's about halfway done. Is the follow-up to this. So this book is really geared towards the senior leaders. But like I said, I'm finding it's getting a lot more traction throughout the organization than I really expected. The next book is geared towards the vice presidents and directors and below. I'm calling it the Digital Transformation Workbook because we've got right now 14 different worksheets. And so it's a little bit of a fun thing, but, you can literally tear these sheets out of the back of the book and either one-on-one or with a small group or, depending on the specific topic, go through each of these worksheets that will help you then apply all of these concepts to your situation. And be able to go through and when you're done, you can take these 14 worksheets and say, hey, we're going to start at the beginning, and this will lay out what your criteria is, the framework for your transformation. What is it that's going to work for us, and how do we apply this? Starting off with, let's look at ourselves. There's a guy named Simon Sinek who has a really great series of videos out right now, and he talks about the golden circle. You draw 3 concentric circles. In the middle is the why. Why do we exist? What would happen if we failed to exist? What's our mission, and how do we align with that? Then the second sphere is the how. The how is going to be a lot based on who you are, but also who you're serving. And that's where your differentiation from competitors will typically come in. And then the what you do is the third and outermost concentric circle. And, that's what you do is the least important. It's how you deliver, but it doesn't define who you are, and it doesn't differentiate you typically from your competition. So by starting at that very point, part of this is just to get a realignment and a reset on who are we, why do we exist, what's our mission. Let's make sure that we're aligned with our mission, and then we can align our resources with our mission, and we're going to be in a much better place than we were before. And a lot of what this book helps is to help set up systems that are continuous, continuous process improvement, where we encourage folks to take a risk, try something new and different, treat it like an experiment. Did you get your expected results? If yes, great. Then we might want to change what we're doing to match that. We didn't get the results, no problem. What did we learn? And to continue to take these experiments, and when we have an improvement, share it with other folks and make the change. Be like Bruce Lee, drop the old way, pick up the new way, and continue to get better and better. Makes us deliver faster, better, and cheaper. And a big part of success in here, and we talk about this in the book too, is automating the security components. And for those folks that are in regulated industries, we're finding a ton of regulators are loving what we're putting in because it's about transparency and automated controls. So you may remember, having to do things around Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX controls, around, ours reporting.
I don't remember that at all.
Right. Try to block that out of your mind. But
well,
particularly financial services. They love the transparency and the data. It's all right there, and consistently applied controls so that governance now becomes, hey, we've designed these processes to be in compliance, and if there's something that's not, then we can deal with it as an exception, and it's much easier and more efficient.
Yeah, no, I was around when Survey-Nosely was introduced. What a mess that was.
Yes.
Can you do me
consultants.
Yeah. Can you do me a favor? Can you define DevOps for me? I missed that question to you a little earlier.
Yeah, sure, no problem. DevOps is really bringing the folks from the development world and the operations world together and collaborating together. It's a big part of the cultural piece. In fact, when we look to the DevOps Institute, which is kind of the de facto standard organization for DevOps, they talk about it's really a movement. It's about professional and philosophical changes to enable us to work together better. Historically, developers want to create new software, add new features. They want to change what's in place in our production environments. On the other hand, operations folks are, the opposite side of that coin. Their goal is to maintain stability, ongoing performance, safety. They don't like change. And so what DevOps is about is bringing the development teams and the operation teams together. Instead of having them in two separate groups, sometimes even in two separate buildings, it's bringing those folks together so that they can work together. And, the development teams can see and, in fact, now have more responsibility for supporting that code in production than they had just a few years ago. And the operations folks can see that, hey, these guys aren't just throwing garbage over the wall. They're really working hard, and they're doing all kinds of testing. And the reality is sometimes stuff happens. Things go wrong. Tests don't, yield everything that you thought. And so having those teams work together, we can become much more resilient. And in fact, as we make these transformations, we'll find that companies like Netflix, for example, have taught us ways to significantly improve the stability of our production environments. They put in what they call their Simian Army. The very first piece of software of that software portfolio was called the Chaos Monkey. And it was intended to be kind of what it sounds like. It's like there's a monkey loose in the data center, pulling cables out, chewing through wires, banging on stuff. And so they, what would happen is, and in the IT, you've probably seen this yourself, things don't go wrong, at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. They go wrong at 2 a.m., on a Sunday morning. And so by putting this Chaos Monkey in place, they would intentionally, randomly take down servers. And, they, by doing that, learn to be very good at recovering that. So, in fact, you don't even see that happening in Netflix today. One of the great things about that, unless, you're in the neighborhood like I have, when everybody gets on at 8 p.m. and things slow down. But otherwise, Netflix is almost bulletproof, right? It's really good because they have taught themselves resilience by purposely injecting faults into their network. And that's part of this new approach of, we can put things into production very quickly and safely. And, by doing it in an automated way, if we put it in place, number one, we can do it in different ways that just weren't possible before. We can use different kinds of release capabilities, like one we call a canary release. We take this, and it comes from the canary in the coal mine concept. We can take this new feature, and we can put it out to a small number of folks and see how it goes. A, is it stable? B, do they like it? C, does it do what we thought it was going to do? And if it's good, then great. We can expand that and make that available to more folks. If it's not good, then we've sort of limited the blast radius, if you will, very limited range. We can make corrections, go back to the drawing boards, and do that over again. The kind of thing we couldn't have done in a ERP system in the past. By using the cloud and modern development tools and management tools, that becomes a very easy thing to do, and many other different kinds of releases that we couldn't do before.
Yeah, I mean, I was exposed to releases had to be done on Sunday morning or Friday night. Actually,
right.
Actually Friday night, and then I was an MRP specialist, so our MRP runs for the recalculations had to be done on Friday night, and hopefully they'd be done by Sunday afternoon.
Right. And if there's a problem, then you're going to be in there babysitting that thing to make sure that by 9 o'clock on Monday morning, the users could get back in and use their systems. And, that's exactly one of the things that we want to eliminate is, to be able to do these things. And one of the interesting things is talking with other companies when we were first beginning our journey on this. One of the things we found out that just really just drove us nuts trying to wrap our heads around it was talking to the folks at TurboTax, at Intuit, that when they make most of their changes in their code during tax season. We would have thought it was just the opposite, right? No, don't touch that code while everybody is in there. But they found that they get so much more feedback, so much more traction during tax season. That's when they do the vast majority of their testing.
Wow. So let me ask you too. Yeah, let me ask you too. If I'm a new entrepreneur, I mean, what do I have to think about with the information that you've given us?
The opportunity for a new entrepreneur is to start off right. And most entrepreneurs aren't focused on technology. They're more focused on whatever it is that they're doing, whatever their product or service is. And it might be tempting to choose, a technology solution that is comfortable based on what they've seen before, what other folks have done, rather than to, embrace the cloud technology from the very start. And that's what I would really, suggest to them is to go through the process of understanding themselves and their mission, get very clear on their alignment with who they are and what they want to be, and then align their resources to that. And if it's a piece of their business that does not provide a competitive differentiation or advantage, then don't invest in that. So don't buy an ERP system. Use the technology that's available. And even if you have to invest a little bit more up front, the ability to use microservices and APIs in the cloud will pay for itself very quickly. For example, in the testing, one of the problems that we've always had in the past was it was prohibitively expensive to have a complete copy of the production environment to run tests against. And so what happens is we write the scripts, we execute the scripts, and then when we see the results, a lot of times the answer when we got results that we weren't expecting was, oh, well, that's because it's not the production environment. We just don't have that many accounts. We don't have all of the systems. We don't have the amount of data and other things going on. And so we never really did the good job of testing that we thought we were doing or we may have represented that we were doing. In a cloud environment, however, you spin up and spin down, so you only use what you need when you need it. So you're able to actually do a completely just like production testing because you don't have to pay for that environment to be there forever. You can spin it up. And by using a microservices approach, you don't have to do the same kinds of maintenance that we've done in the past. Microservices is when we take all of the different pieces or functionality and put them into separate programs. So if we want to change one piece, we're only changing that piece. We don't have to change the whole thing. And by taking that approach, we can also then create the service that says, hey, if only 12 people are using it and, one node is sufficient, fantastic. But all of a sudden we have a spike and, 12,000 people are on. Well, with the cloud, everything is readily available, and you can do what we call scaling horizontally. So, these 12 folks can be on this one node. We need 1,000 more nodes, no big deal. Within a few seconds, we can spin all of those nodes up with, a fresh copy of that. And that's where part of the safety and security comes in. We can automate all of our security testing so that we know that everything is tested every time before it goes into production. And we can monitor those to make sure that, they're performing the way they're supposed to, so that if some bad guy gets in, if an intrusion is happening, we can shut those down and spin them up again. So problems like the buffer overruns that we had in the past that would actually create some code on our servers by using the cloud, that is no longer even possible, because each time we instantiate this, we basically take an image of that and create a new version in what we call a container. And when something goes wrong, the results, the inputs or the outputs don't match our expected parameters, we don't have to even worry about the intrusion. We can just blow that away, spin up a new one, just like we did with the Chaos Monkey with Netflix. Our customers continue to march, but we're able to avoid the ability to have folks do bad things on our servers because they don't exist the way they used to. So there's a whole bunch of little things that all begin to come together to make this a much better experience and more effective and efficient at the same time for business owners and leaders.
Now, Jack, let me ask you a question, too, and I remember running into this, is that people don't know, let's see, how do I say this? People don't know the right questions to ask because they don't know what to ask.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And again, it sure does. And that's part of the reason for this book, too, is this can become very technical very quickly. And while we have included information for the technical folks, that's part of the reason for having the separate book for the implementation. This is a little bit higher level, but it helps with understanding, how these pieces all play together, and it guides you through, what are the questions that we need to ask. Because honestly, anymore, they're not that tough. One of the things that IT did, good, bad, or indifferent, for the past really 50 years, is have built this wall between business and IT that says, hey, we're the technology guys. We know this stuff, and you're just business folks. You don't. Well, that might have been true 50 years ago. That's questionable still. But today, we find our business users are every bit as technically savvy as the IT folks that are providing the technology solutions. So part of this is around kind of pulling down that facade and saying, hey, let's talk about what you need to do. Let's get rid of a lot of that jargon that doesn't make sense and focus on these are the questions you need to be asking. And most of it comes down to, the vast majority is, all around value. How and where are we creating value and delivering that value to our customers? The things that aren't doing those directly, we should question whether we even do them or not. And if we do need to do them, we need to automate that as much as possible so that our folks can be focused on creating and delivering value. As long as we're doing that, we're going to be so much better off than our competitors who are worried about the non-value added things. How much value does it add to do an annual review on your employees? Not much. In fact, we find that those tend to be more disengaging than anything else, particularly when it's an annual event, as opposed to someone who is very much aligned with the value. They see the value being created and delivered. They're a part of the value being created and delivered. It really changes the whole nature of the relationship. And if we can truly show them that we are invested in our employees, we want them to grow with us. When they do well, we do well. When we do well, they do well. And that's where you get this virtuous cycle that I mentioned earlier. People are happier. They perform at a higher level. Their retention is better. They can be focused on customers. When we've done these things. And so putting these technology pieces in place anymore, so much of it has been abstracted that it's really just talking about business now. What is it that we need to do to be where our customers need us to be, want us to be?
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is especially, and I looked at it from my standpoint, because I did a lot of moving around, and with the continued exposure to updated technology, it enhanced my resume, especially as an IT person, because you know that you're not, you got a half-life in most organizations, and you got to move along, right?
Right.
So,
and that's where again, moving to the cloud can really help with that, because then you let the folks, let Google figure out the best way of flowing this data the way I need to, because they're really good at that. I'll focus on what data we need.
Yeah. Well, we got to wind this puppy down here, Jack. We went off pretty fast.
Yes,
so,
time flies.
It does. So how do people get a hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of me is via LinkedIn or my website, www.standingonshoulders.us is the book website, and that will link you to my LinkedIn. I like to use LinkedIn because it helps to, provide a foundation for the conversation. We can talk about things, and you've got a picture of, okay, how much of this should I be buying, right? How much do I believe? How, does this guy have the credibility to be making these kinds of statements? It's also can be, very asynchronous, and it's a great way to share information, et cetera, in a pretty low-profile way. But the website is great as well, and I also have an email at standingonshoulders.llc@gmail.com.
Okay. Well, Jack, thank you for your time and the information. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
Great. This is Mark Stowers, the host of the radio show called I Made It. Talk to you later.